Okay, so this is the compiled option of all the ideas and all the crazy things that I have been through the years to basically try to get some idea of how to be self, or what is to be self, and how exactly that transcends to, conversating with other people, or how to explore a bit more about oneself, and maybe how to identify a bit more about who you are, what you do, and where you should go about things, especially if you've been like me through tons of online tests at some point when you were younger, or when you're now in adult life trying to figure out how things work. So I think that's like one of the things that I could share through how I did it. So as you can see right now, I'm using my uh, compiled book. So the book that also does a bit more of the text compilations and information. So frankly, let's get to the start of the journey. So how many times have you read endless articles online trying to figure out your own self? How many tests have you taken to try and have some idea of where to go in life? How many times have you been there trying to figure out why things go the way they go? Endless. The answer is most of the time endless. It was the same for me. From the moment of the internet hit off and there were tests available, I was trying to find that answer to a question we all ask at some point in life. Why am I here? Or rather, what should I do? And that is absolutely normal to ask this. Not all of us know straight off the bat from birth what to do in life. Following that calling and not taking the thoughts, opinions of others into consideration. What I began trying to figure out at first was astrology. Making a chart, trying to understand what's where, how it relates or does not relate, how it affects me, etc. But at the very start, even as I read the explanations on the website, or many websites I read, but I could not really understand it all. I read it, but it passed by my understanding. I was not prepared. Then there were other resources that got me to think, to research, to see if that applies to me or works for me. There are also moments when I was vulnerable in my search. That is when some of the most odd people approached me, tried to get me into some communities that are called cults in other terms. Therefore, being out there in your search is quite the adventure in itself, but do have the skill to question all, research, feel the common sense, and not entirely rely on emotions. Some will try to use, abuse, exploit, profit, and/or leech off of you when you are in that search. They're really good at using your troubles and expectations and traumas against you, so be aware of those who try that. With that warning out there, let us commence this journey and see how far off we venture together. So the chapter 1 should be astrology. So let us begin with one of the most hyped things out there in the world right now, currently. So if we take, for example, the astrology, we get to know that there's 12 zodiac signs, depending on how exactly we perceive information. Some say there's 13, some others use different kind of zodiac signs. There's like a multitude of zodiacs, anywhere from Egyptian to Aztec to any others that one could think of. But here we'll try to seek the basic one that is applied and known for the most of astrology. So here we shall use the resource by the name Britannica, and there's the link, as you can see. Yes, I've copy pasted the article, but that is to get to know a bit more about it. So astrology is a type of divination that involves the forecasting of earthly and human events through the observation and interpretation of the fixed stars, sun, moon, and the planets. That is like the basic thing out there. So astrology is basically us looking up and trying to figure out what's up and how it correlates to what we have on the planet Earth. Currently, there's way too many jokes about how the planet Earth itself is quite the drama queen in general, so that's quite something. So, where should we begin? And there's the nature and significance, prediction of mundane events based on the bodies of the things out there in the world, astral omens, purposes of astrology. So The original purpose of astrology, on the other hand, was to inform the individual of the course of his life on the basis of positions and planets and the zodiacal signs at the moment of his birth or conception. So that basically gives us a bit more information about how you were born and what was there out in the greatness of the sky and how that kind of affects your being in itself. So jumping a little bit forth, we can take a look at the 12 signs. So the 12 signs is Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. So that is the most known 12 zodiac signs. Each one also correlates to the houses, as that is basically your fields of life. Anything from you personally, how you're being perceived, your career, your money, your relationships, your health, your abilities, your family, anything and all under the earth. And that is basically what, for most part, the graphs, if you do your own one, should look like, or different, but within the similar pretext. So for me, this is mine, you're welcome. It was quite something. When I first saw this, I was quite confused, and genuinely when you read through the annotations on the websites, you get confused there also, because you don't necessarily know exactly what to look at. For example, if we go to astro.com, you get to see the portrait of your own self, and there's pretty much the same thing. But the thing is that it explains on a side what's the aspects and what it does and da-di-da-da. So that sort of helps you get to know you at the time of your birth. But because the astrology is quite a finicky aspect, I would say, your birth chart as is basically gives you an idea of how it shows you at the time of your birth and the plan basically for the time of your birth. But it transcends with the time, so it moves. That's kind of like one of the aspects I got to know after a while, is that it does not stand in the same place and that it is basically different. So currently your ascendant, for example, or the placement of your ascendant can be in absolutely another sign, and that will affect you differently, which is why one would genuinely suggest to go and try out apps which help with transitions of the planetary movements and everything else, to get to know a little bit more about what's up right now currently and how it affects you. Because if you, for example, look here, yes, it's your chart. But if you go in astro.com and, for example, try out locational astrology and then click into astro travel, you can also get to know about planetary aspects. So where in the world would it be best for you to be and how it might affect you, but harmonious and disharmonious aspects. And that's when the madness begins. Example. Preview type A. So some of the astrologers say that the Venus, as you can see here, Venus sign, that correlates with your financial benefits and with your potential partner being, sort of where you can find him, her, and how that can correlate in your world. But there's also ascendant and descendant, an IC, which is like the midheaven aspect. So in my case, my whatchamacallit, ascendant, yes, there we go. Ascendant is like in out here. So quite the other side of the world. And that is also like one of the planetary aspects which sort of kind of help you find your partner. Other things I've heard about the astrological shebang is basically that your Jupiter lines, it's like, as you can see, one in here, which is like bright purplish pink. This is basically your places where you get your best options of career jump starts and career improvements, if that is what you're seeking for. Some others might seek other placements. For example, the most common thing that one could get off with to literally do your own brain is the moon aspects. So the moon aspects, they bring in a bit more of the friendships, the deep understandings, the emotions, and to basically explore yourself. But in some cases, it's not permanent, and or it could be genuinely for a bit of time. So as you can see in here with the explanation as it goes, chances of fulfilling a satisfying love relationship are quite high. However, the moon's influence does not guarantee permanence. So depending on the position of where and how, it can guarantee you, yes, having some sort of relationships that can be fulfilling at the point, but then it's not going to be for a long while. So even with astrocartography, because it's all astrology nonetheless, there's things that can help, but some of them do not guarantee permanence. And if I do pull this up and show you hows and what, yes, this is where I was born. I did live on the moon DS line, and frankly, it was shite. In a sense that, yes, I did meet a bunch of really good friends and a bunch of really good people, but it was not for long, and it was short-lived, genuinely. I did live in London also, and in here, as you can see, there's this Mercury line. Opportunity to work through unfinished businesses. I did work a lot, but then again, it is not the best for the people who are just starting off, because this line entitles in itself that you need to already have something to kind of like work from it and then gain something. I was studying in there. It was a mess. Stop it all, there's the trine of the Jupiter sextile. And that's kind of like work your tits off energy. And it kind of did work my tits off, but it did not give me much. Also lived in the Italy, and then here we have the Pluto trine sextile and the Venus square. So yes, a little bit of the adventure time, to be honest, and meeting quite interesting friends. And because of the Pluto line, forceful, absolutely. You become interested in things, you rearrange your inner self a multitude of times, questioning whether you're doing the things that are right or wrong, and whether you're actually going the right way about it. So Pluto is also kind of like the planet of death and rebirth, which is also there with the Scorpio sign and Scorpio sun. So for me, it was quite a baffling, a battling area in itself. So that was a bit treacherous, as it were. Anyway, so altogether, using astrology, you can genuinely pinpoint what works for you, what does not work for you, where you can go on the planet, which would benefit. But then again, depending on your birth chart and how planets are located in it and how it affects you in general, you go into the places that are known to be positive or affect you positively. It can actually not be positive, do the damage. Instead, if it collides or has some different aspects to your birth chart. So if something yada yada Venus aspect does not lie well in your chart and it has some sort of like square or opposition going on, it might be actually more troublesome traveling to the Venus ascendant or midheaven lines. But then again, consult the professionals. I'm not a professional. I was just exploring the heck out of it as much as I could. Then, within the same plane of astrology, we'll have also Hellenistic period. Indian astrology is also epic. It has a lot of things going on, and it has different charts, which is quite something new that I also discovered. So they have, it actually looks like a freaking origami, but it makes a lot of sense. It's quite hard to find it and to get a bit more sight in Vedic astrology. But it is very also interesting to get more elaboration on how it goes and what it does. So astrology in such is sort of a good start if you want to look at what's up and where it goes. And as a basic navigational map of yourself, because if you go into the same astro chart, so if we go into, okay, so personality, psychological personal portrait, for example, and then you get some basic explanations on hows and what, so that you don't have to go into the endless crazy research. But then again, houses. Houses is one of the things that I enjoyed the heck out of to learn, because each house represents something in your life. So the first one being you, the second being gains, finances, how to make stuff happen. And yeah, it's a mess. But it frankly does a bit more. With Indian charts, you also get the houses of the money, the self, the family, all the basic things that you get in that astrology. But it has a little bit more of its own twist on it and its own kind of like way of perception, which is also cool. So there's also astrology that's been dated in other countries and historically across the world. In modern times, it is a bit more known to people through the TikTok and the internet itself, and there's a lot that goes on. So frankly, it's not just about this, because this, as we know, the astrology itself with like Aries, the Ram, March 21 to April 19, I kind of figured through the lot of the astrologers that basically the sun sign, yes, it affects you, but I have seen too many astrologers say that it's not the sun sign that affects you the most, it's your ascendant that affects you the most and is the one that's being portrayed the most out of you. So even in my case, yes, I am Scorpio sun, but I'm Libra ascendant. So frankly, for the most part, people do perceive me as Libra. So it's a mess. Astrology currently. So there's a lot of historical aspects that are within this whole thing. But generally in here you can also find a bunch of information, the calendars and the Chinese calendars, and there's a lot of things going around. And there's the part of the calendars that is divided into the solar, lunar, and lunisolar calendar. So each of the astrological aspects and, well, genuinely religions and places in the world, they use the calendar as is, but just a little bit different to every once in a while. So the perception is also different, and with these movements of the lunar calendar, things such as Beltane and Samhain and other great joyous occasions show up to show the lunar solstice, summer solstice, spring and autumn solstice, and other little bits that are attributed mostly to the pagan rituals and pagan things, but I feel that it's not only pagan, it's been dated in a lot of other cultures, and it's very interesting to actually note or explore in itself to see that maybe as a solar calendar that you explore, you might be a one thing, but in the lunar or lunisolar calendar, you can be an absolutely another being with other attributes. So that in itself, I have seen a Jewish calendar, which is epic, and it has its own leap months and own days and the ways of being, and it's roughly one of the coolest things ever to check. Same with the Chinese calendars and those in the Asian cultures. There's a lot of calendars that I've yet to explore, and there's a lot of things that you can yet to learn from them. So if we take our calendar and we go about just like Aries, Taurus, and everything else, the Asian cultures, they tend to use the year as an assigned birth animal. And instead of using the typical 12 zodiac signs, they use the 12 animals of the zodiac. So it can be the monkey, the ox, rabbit, rat, dragon, snake, and there's a bunch more, which I forgot. So I do apologize for that. And each of these animals, they also have attributes that are divided in between earth, metal, fire, air, and water. So it's not that you can genuinely replicate the same person, because every year is a different year, and every year every animal has its own attribute. So it's kind of interesting. Yeah, so there's a lot of that going on. So Hebrew names of the months with their Babylonian analogs. So as you can see here, there is a bunch of months also in the calendar itself that is used, and how it is also perceived by here and there other stuff. So also you can find astrology podcasts and resources online to go and check a bit more into what's and where. So some people also, like, once again, say that there's 13 zodiac signs, and it also attributes to this and that. But if we go a little bit into like sun sign, moon sign, rising, the sun is the core self, the moon is the inner self, and the rising is the outer self. So might not make sense. I do get that. But the way I understood it after a while is that the moon sign is basically your emotions and how you deal with things emotionally. So it's your inner turbulence, inner ability to go through things, to analyze, to kind of like mull over, to brew over and let things go. Or you genuinely, if you're an Aries, you go into argumentative mode. If you're like me, like Pisces, you overthink a fuck ton. And basically, eventually, you get to the point of just burning out self, because that's kind of like your thing. Your sun sign is your core self. So that is the attributes that are present, and that is you, sort of kind of like the everyday, the mundane thing that you deal with yourself. So it's not necessarily something that other people see, it's that you have the air of it about yourself because you know yourself, who you are. And the rising sign is the outer self. So that is mostly perceived by other people, how other people see you, how you talk to other people, how you manage situations, and how you deal with things is your rising sign. So that too should be mostly helped with by other people. So here the book suggestions that I've put in would be the Linda Goodman's Sun Signs. It's a very thick ass book, which has the aspects such as the sign as a boss or as a worker, employee, as well as a child, as a grown-up, as a young adult. And it shows a bit more how each sign progresses with the years and how the attributes to each sign shows through the years. So as a child, it could be one thing of being a bit more curious, a bit more outgoing, a bit more interested in the world. But as you hit the young adult years, the same sign can change into being a bit more closed in, a bit more not that engaging with the outside world. But then again, in the adult years, it can once again shift and change. There's also this prolific years, I guess. Yeah, so each year corresponds to a certain life kind of like idea which you sort of do within that year, or you achieve within that year. So the Cosmic Calendar by Christopher Renstrom also goes in depth of sun, moon, ascendant, more signs, planets, and aspects of the planets in the sign. So that book, as it is right now, it has a bit more information of how planets affect the person. So planets such as Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Uranus, Pluto, you get to know a bit more about how that affects you personally, or how that affects a whole generation, because each planet has its own amount of time it spins around the Earth, the cycle. So each cycle lasts a certain amount of years, and that basically gets to the point of having a whole generation under a certain sign of a certain planet, which is also quite cool to go into the depths and to explore. So those two books are something, I don't know, you wanna, or want, I mean, it's up to you, to read to get a bit more ideas into it. But genuinely, with the astro.com or pretty much any other websites, you can generally get a lot also of the information, including the asteroids also, because there's certain asteroids like Lilith, like Juno, and others that show the aspects of self, which you can go into the depths and just go and explore like a crazy person to see what else fits the bill, or what else you should be aware of. Because I think Chiron right now is very much regarded as the wounded healer, and that one aspect which for most people is something you should learn and you should heal from to be able to move on with the things you want to do with your life. So that's that. So there we go, a little bit about the houses. So the first one, house, astrologically correlates with Aries and is the house of self. Physical appearance, identity, characteristics, resourcefulness, outlook, and impressions, elegance. Can I actually make it bigger? Yes, I can. Woohoo! Ego, personality, goals, determination, beginnings, and initiatives. The second is Taurus, and its gain, house of value, material, immaterial things, certain value, money, possessions, acquisitions, cultivation, substance, and self-worth. The third house is Gemini, house of sharing, so it's communication, distribution, generosity, intelligence, development, siblings, locomotion, and transportation, ephemera. The fourth is Cancer, so it's ancestry, heritage, roots, house of home and family, foundation, environment, mother, or caretaker, housing and household, neighborhood matters, comfort, security, tiredness, pets. So as you can see, the fifth is house of pleasure, sixth is house of health, seventh, house of balance, eighth is house of transformation, ninth, house of purpose, 10th, house of enterprise, 11th, house of blessings, and 12th, house of sacrifice. So that basically also gives you a little bit of an idea of how it works. So there's routines in the house of health, for example. So depending on what you have in your birth chart, that might help you out with idea of how you should structure your health, or how you should structure your partnerships, and or where you can find your partner. House of transformational cycles of death and rebirth. So that also gives you some idea of how certain things can come into your life or go out of your life, and with a bang or with a more subtle way of it being. House of blessings, benefits from effort, friends, acquaintances, like-minded attitudes, belongings, groups, communities, associations. So that can also show a little bit of things that are being acquired through the common help, common goals, community, awesome stuff. The purpose, though, with the ninth house is Sag, travel and foreign affairs, culture. I've also heard a bunch about how, depending on aspects of planets and houses, like the ninth, I think the 7th and the 11th or the 12th, you can also find out if you might find your partner whilst traveling, or they could be somebody from another country or another culture altogether. So go hard into research. So there's also this. So mutable, so there's the cardinal signs, the mutable signs, the fixed signs. And that is basically a lot of things that are working out in here. So once again, the houses and their meanings in a way, and how it correlates. So depending on where you have your sun sign, your ascendant, and your moon sign, and other aspects, you can get a bit more sense into how it works with you, or how it might not work with you. There's the astrocartography bit, which we explored earlier. So in here we have a bit more about, there we go, the the Chinese, the Asian part of it, with the monkey, goat, rooster, dog, pig, rat, ox, tiger, rabbit, dragon, snake, and horse. So each of those is attributed not only to the year, but to the month, day, and hour. And each one of those might correspond to your inner animal, outer animal, and other attributes. So there's animals attributed to the day even, you know, so you can have a bit more of an idea of who you are and what you are, and of course, once again, research. So this in itself might give you a broader aspect just by exploring it also besides the typical astrology, having a little bit of like Eastern astrology added to it might give you a bit more sense of how to understand self, as the attributes might differ, but they could still apply. And it's rather awesome to look at stuff like this. The Vedic signs also are quite something to go through, and the differentials of the astrology. There's also the feng shui that affects each of the signs and positions and how it goes by. And feng shui I came across because I was a kid and my mom was into a little bit of reading magazines about feng shui and setting things right in the house, but that still was weird, especially when she brought this money bringing frog, but she placed it in the wrong place, and just a disaster. So there's colors that attribute to your feng shui. There's also the items, the special things, and the placements of the items in the house or your room. And each room in the house has its own meaning and its own energy attributes, kind of like the attributes of metal, earth, fire, water, and air. And depending on what it is, or kind of like the way about it, it's kind of like not to mess around with it. So it's basically like you cannot just put pretty much any sort of item you find into any sort of random location. You actually got to research about how the energy circulates through your house. And that's a whole lot of different research. And it also is about the directions, planetary directions, you know, north, south, east, west, and how you position things around the house. So depending on what's what, it's also a bit of a mess. So it's a bit, so different areas. So there you go, a little bit more on how that looks like and what it means, the knowledge, the theme, if you want that, where it is, how to do it, how to, you know, all of that. There's also the 5 elements, which I spoke about, and what it means and what it does. So this is a little bit of tips, but genuinely about this whole thing with astrology and the feng shui and the whole of the Eastern astrology, what I can genuinely say is good luck researching and good luck getting a little bit more information, because all I can do is just provide you some idea of how it looks like. And with this piece of PDF, a little bit more on where to find the information and a little bit more information to read about if that is your cup of tea. So there we go, and that is it for now.